The alien fleet arrived like a storm of fire and metal, blotting out the distant stars as they emerged from hyperspace. 10,000 warships, each a behemoth of destruction, glided forward in perfect formation. The Dominion had come for Earth. From the bridge of the Dominion command ship, Grand Admiral Selvoran gazed at the blue planet in the distance. His mandibles clicked in amusement. Humanity had defied the Dominion for too long, refusing to bow, refusing to surrender. But now, there would be no negotiations, no warnings, only annihilation. Prepare the bombardment, Selvoran ordered, his voice sharp and cold. Destroy their defenses, reduce their world to dust. The Dominion fleet moved into attack positions, weapons charging. Planets had fallen before them without resistance. Earth would be no different, or so they believed. On the surface of the planet, deep within an underground command center, Admiral Elias Carter watched the enemy fleet on a massive screen. His face was grim, his jaw tight. 10,000 ships against Earth's battered, outdated fleet. They didn't stand a chance. Every simulation, every prediction ended the same way, with Earth's complete destruction. But there was one ship, one final hope. The UHS Revenant, a prototype warship untested in real combat. Built in secret, designed with technology no alien empire had ever encountered. And now, it was Earth's last line of defense. "Is the Revenant ready?" Carter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Sarah Whittaker, standing beside him, hesitated before answering. "She's online, Admiral. But the ship has never been tested under full combat conditions. We don't even know if—" "It doesn't matter," Carter interrupted. "Launch it." The order was given. Deep within a hidden facility on Earth's moon, the Revenant came to life. Its engines hummed with an energy unlike anything seen before. A sleek black warship with no visible weapons, no traditional shielding, and no recognizable technology, just a smooth, featureless hull. To any observer, it looked unarmed, helpless. But it was something far more dangerous. The Dominion fleet detected the launch immediately. A single human warship rising from the moon, heading straight for them. The alien commanders scoffed. One ship against 10,000. It was a joke. Selvoran smirked, watching the lonely vessel approach. "They send a single ship to fight us." He let out a deep, rumbling laugh. "Destroy it." The order went out. Thousands of weapons locked onto the Revenant, preparing to fire. But before they could pull the trigger, the human ship vanished. Not cloaked, not hidden. It simply disappeared. Confusion spread through the Dominion ranks. Sensors scanned frantically, searching for any sign of the ship. It was impossible. No ship could just vanish. Then, without warning, the first Dominion battleship exploded. No impact, no energy readings, no warning. One moment, the massive warship was there. The next, it was gone, reduced to burning wreckage in an instant. Panic rippled through the alien fleet. Selvoran's eyes widened. What was that? Another explosion, then another. In the span of 5 seconds, 6 of his warships were obliterated. Still, there was no sign of the enemy. No shots fired. No visible attack. The Revenant remained unseen. "Find it." Selvoran roared. "What are we dealing with?" But his officers had no answers. The Revenant was unlike anything in the galaxy. It didn't fight like a traditional warship. It didn't fire missiles or energy beams. It was something else. Something terrifying. More Dominion ships exploded, ripped apart by an invisible force. The fleet, once an unstoppable force of destruction, was now a slaughterhouse. Soldiers screamed over the comms, their voices filled with horror as they watched their ships be torn apart by an enemy they couldn't see. Then, for the first time, the Revenant reappeared. It drifted silently through the battlefield, its dark hull untouched, floating like a phantom among the wreckage. The Dominion warships turned their weapons toward it and fired everything they had: lasers, missiles, plasma cannons. The space around the Revenant burned with energy. And yet, nothing touched it. The attack simply vanished before reaching the ship. Missiles detonated in empty space. Energy beams disappeared as if they had never existed. Xelvorin's blood ran cold. This is impossible. The Revenant moved again. Faster than any known ship, it darted between enemy formations, and wherever it passed, ships died. No traces of a weapon. No sign of any energy discharge. Just death. A deep, terrible realization settled over the Dominion forces. They weren't hunting the human ship. It was hunting them. Xelvorin felt something he had never felt before in his long career. Fear. The battle, if it could even be called that, was already lost. The Dominion fleet was in chaos. Ships were colliding, trying to escape. Thousands of aliens, once proud conquerors, were now running for their lives. On Earth, Admiral Carter watched it all unfold on the screen, his face unreadable. Whittaker stood beside him, whispering, "My God, is this really our ship?" Carter exhaled slowly. "No," he said, "it's something more." The Revenant came to a halt in the middle of the battlefield. The remaining Dominion ships, once so confident in their overwhelming numbers, now hesitated. They were afraid. For the first time in history, the great Dominion fleet was powerless. Then the Revenant sent out a message. No words, no threats, just a simple transmission to every Dominion ship. A countdown. 10 seconds. Xelvorin stared at the numbers on his screen. He didn't understand. "What is this?" he demanded. "What does it mean?" 5 seconds. The Dominion commanders screamed for retreat, but it was too late. 0. The battlefield erupted in white light. And then, silence. The great invasion fleet of the Dominion was no more. 10,000 ships had come to destroy Earth. Now, only one remained. The Revenant stood alone, untouched, drifting silently through the wreckage. And across the galaxy, every empire that had once dismissed humanity as weak began to tremble. The Dominion fleet was in chaos. In the span of mere minutes, the unstoppable armada had been reduced to burning wreckage. The void of space, once filled with the confident formations of 10,000 warships, was now littered with the shattered remains of what was supposed to be Earth's doom. Grand Admiral Xelvorin stood frozen, his mind refusing to accept what his own eyes were witnessing. The Revenant was still there, motionless, floating like a ghost among the debris. It had not fired a single visible shot. No energy signatures, no missiles, no impact trails. And yet, Dominion ships had died, thousands of them, without resistance. The remaining warships, once proud symbols of the Dominion's dominance, now hesitated. Panic had taken root. Officers shouted over the comms, demanding answers. Some ships had already broken formation, trying to flee, but where could they go? The Revenant was faster than anything they had ever seen. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. Status report. Xelvorin snapped, his voice sharp with desperation. His bridge crew scrambled to make sense of the situation. A comms officer turned, eyes wide with terror. "Admiral, we have lost contact with over 70% of our forces." "Impossible." Xelvorin snarled. "That ship is only one vessel." "One." Another officer, his voice barely steady, spoke. "Sir, it doesn't fight like a normal ship. We have no data, no strategy to counter it. Every attack we make just fails." Xelvorin clenched his mandibles, struggling to suppress the cold dread creeping up his spine. He had never encountered an enemy like this. No one had. The Revenant moved again. It didn't charge, didn't fire, didn't even acknowledge the terrified fleet surrounding it. Instead, it flickered, vanishing and reappearing in an instant, closing the distance between itself and the Dominion's strongest dreadnought. The dreadnought was the last true powerhouse in the fleet, a fortress of steel and plasma shields. Its weapons alone could annihilate a planet. It had wiped out entire species before. If there was any ship that could withstand whatever nightmare technology the Revenant possessed, it was this one. Or so they thought. The massive warship fired everything it had. A storm of energy, missiles, and high-impact projectiles erupted from its hull, lighting up the darkness of space in a spectacular display of destruction. No ship, nothing, could survive such firepower. But the Revenant did not evade. It did not shield itself. It simply remained where it was, as if unconcerned. The dreadnought's weapons struck empty space. The ship was still there, and yet the attacks never reached it. Xelvorin's breath hitched. No. Then, the dreadnought imploded. Not exploded. Imploded. As if something had reached inside the ship and crushed it from within. Entire sections of the warship folded inward, its structure collapsing into itself in an instant. The mighty Dominion dreadnought, once an unbreakable wall of firepower, was reduced to nothing but dust. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Dominion fleet had no more words, no more orders, no more courage. Panic spread like wildfire. Ships turned and ran, breaking rank, desperate to escape. The Dominion fleet, the greatest in the galaxy, was fleeing. But the Revenant did not chase them. It did not pursue victory. It simply hovered, watching, waiting, as if it was measuring them. On Earth, Admiral Carter and his officers sat in stunned silence. What had started as a hopeless battle had become something else entirely. Humanity was winning, but not through brute force. Through fear. "Sir," Commander Whittaker finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" Carter exhaled, his eyes locked onto the screen. The Dominion had come to wipe out Earth, but now they were running like frightened prey. And the Revenant, he didn't know if it had been built for war, or if it had been built for something far worse. "We wait," Carter said at last, "and we see if they survive long enough to tell the galaxy what happened here." Above them, in the vast darkness of space, the Revenant remained, silent, watching, and waiting. The Dominion fleet was shattered. What was once the galaxy's most feared armada had been reduced to wreckage in mere moments. The survivors fled in terror, their formations broken, their discipline destroyed. Thousands of warships had arrived to crush Earth. Now only a fraction remained, limping away like wounded animals. Grand Admiral Xelvorin sat motionless on the bridge of his command ship, his claws gripping the armrests so tightly they threatened to snap. The Revenant had not pursued them. It had not given chase or finished them off. It simply waited, an eerie, motionless specter among the remains of his once great fleet. The silence was unbearable. His officers barely breathed. No one spoke of counterattacks. No one spoke of victory. Those words no longer had meaning. Xelvorin forced himself to stand. His entire body trembled, rage and fear warring within him. "Send word to High Command," he rasped. Tell them the invasion failed." The words tasted like poison. Never in his long career had he spoken of failure. The Dominion did not fail. They conquered. They dominated. And yet today, they had encountered something beyond their understanding. One ship, one single ship had undone everything. His second-in-command hesitated before speaking. "Admiral, what do we tell them about the human weapon?" Xelvorin stared at the image of the Revenant on the main screen. It was motionless, dark, almost unassuming. But he knew better now. It was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. He took a slow breath. Tell them the truth. The order was sent. Across the Dominion's vast empire, the news spread like wildfire. The invasion of Earth had ended in catastrophe. The human weapon, the Revenant, had single-handedly crushed 10,000 warships without firing a single visible shot. The greatest fleet in Dominion history had been slaughtered. And now, the galaxy knew. On Earth, Admiral Carter and his officers watched as the enemy ships continued to flee. Not a single shot had been fired from the surface. The battle had been won, but not by them. Whittaker turned to Carter, her expression unreadable. "Do we send the Revenant after them?" Carter exhaled, his gaze never leaving the screen. He thought about it. It would be easy. The Dominion had no defense against it. The Revenant could hunt them all down, erase the entire fleet, wipe the Dominion from existence. But there was something unsettling about the way it simply waited. "No," Carter said finally. "Let them run." Whittaker hesitated. "Sir, are we even in control of that ship?" Carter had asked himself the same question. The Revenant was humanity's creation, built in secret, designed with technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But had they truly made it, or had they unleashed something? He didn't have an answer. At that moment, the Revenant moved. It didn't fire. It didn't chase. It simply turned toward Earth. Every screen in the command center flickered. Every monitor, every system, every device connected to the global network shut down for a split second. And then, a message appeared. One simple word: awaiting orders. The room fell silent. Carter felt his chest tighten. They had won. But deep down, a terrible thought formed in his mind. Had humanity just created its own nightmare? The Dominion's retreat sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The invincible Armada, the same force that had brought countless civilizations to their knees, had been broken. And the cause of their defeat? A single human ship. No one knew how to process it. No one knew what it meant. Across the Dominion's vast empire, panic took root. The War Council convened in secret, their voices filled with disbelief and fear. Their greatest military minds pored over battle footage, searching for answers, for anything that could explain how 10,000 warships had been annihilated in mere moments. But the footage revealed nothing. Weapons fired at the Revenant simply did not hit. Shields, armor, countermeasures, none of it had mattered. The Dominion's strongest dreadnought had imploded without a single visible attack. Ships had disappeared from existence, as if they had never been there. The battle had not been fought. It had been decided before it even began. And now, the question loomed over them like a shadow. What was the human ship? Grand Admiral Xelvoran stood before the Dominion's high command, his claws clenched behind his back. He had served the Empire for over a century. He had led the Dominion to victory on 100 worlds. And yet, as he spoke, his voice betrayed him. "This was no mere warship," he said, his tone cold and distant. "This was something else." The council chamber was silent. The High Overlord, a being feared by all, sat upon his throne, his many eyes narrowing. "Explain." Xelvoran hesitated. He had spent his entire career laughing at the weaker species of the galaxy. He had mocked their fear. But now, for the first time, he understood it. "I do not believe the humans fully control it," he admitted. "It did not pursue us. It did not strike us down completely. It watched." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. The Dominion did not fear. They did not retreat. And yet, the best fleet in the Empire had done exactly that. The High Overlord exhaled slowly. "And what do you suggest we do?" Xelvoran lifted his gaze. His next words felt like swallowing poison. "We must not provoke the humans again. Not until we understand what we are facing." It was the closest thing to surrender the Dominion had ever spoken. But even as they debated in secrecy, the rest of the galaxy was watching. The Dominion had been humiliated, and for the first time in history, the balance of power was shifting. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Carter stared at the words flashing on the main screen. Awaiting orders. The Revenant had done the impossible. It had stopped the Dominion's invasion without breaking a sweat. But now, the biggest question remained: what next? Commander Whittaker spoke carefully. "Sir, we don't even know how it works. We don't know if we truly command it." Carter nodded. That was the real problem. The Revenant had been designed as humanity's ultimate weapon, but even its own creators barely understood its full capabilities. And now, the ship itself was waiting. For what? Carter leaned forward. Open a channel to the ship. The transmission connected instantly, but there was no human crew, no captain to answer, only silence. And then a voice. Not a machine's voice, not a human's voice. Something else. "You are not ready," it said. The words sent a chill through the room. Whittaker stiffened. What the hell does that mean? Carter's pulse quickened. The Revenant was not just a weapon. It was something more. And now it was speaking to them. And whatever it was, it had plans of its own. The voice echoed in the command center, sending a wave of shock through Admiral Carter and his team. "You are not ready." The words were simple, but their meaning was anything but. Carter sat still, trying to process what had just been said. Was the Revenant speaking to them as an equal, as a tool, or as something else entirely? His mind raced, trying to grasp the implications of the ship's message. They had created it, yes, but had they truly controlled it? Or had they merely unlocked something far beyond their understanding? Commander Whittaker was the first to break the silence. "Sir, what does it mean? Are we in danger?" Her voice was tense, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I don't know," Carter admitted, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. "But we need to find out. Open a line to the Revenant again. We need answers." The officers at the communication station worked quickly, inputting commands. After a few moments of tense silence, the screen flickered, and once again, the same unsettling voice filled the room. "You are not ready." The voice was calm, yet its tone carried an undeniable authority, one that hinted at knowledge far beyond anything humanity had ever known. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't reassuring either. "What does that mean?" Whittaker repeated, her voice tinged with frustration. This time, the voice responded, its words measured but chilling in their clarity. "Your race is young, human. You are full of potential, but you lack the wisdom to wield it. You cannot control what you have unleashed." A cold sweat formed on Carter's brow as the weight of those words hit him. The Revenant wasn't just a ship, it was a force. And whatever it was aware of humanity's shortcomings, aware of its own power. Carter exhaled slowly, trying to keep his emotions in check. "We have no intention of using you for destruction. We built you to protect us." The silence that followed was heavy, like the ship was weighing his words. Finally, the voice responded again, but this time it was different. There was a hint of something ancient in the tone, something far more complex than Carter could comprehend. "Protection. Is that what you believe? I was built for more than that, human. I was built for a purpose you are not yet ready to understand." The implications of those words sent a shiver down Carter's spine. What was the Revenant really? Was it humanity's creation, or had it been a tool? No, a force that had been awakened? And if it was more than just a ship, what kind of purpose did it have? Whittaker turned to Carter, her face pale. "Sir, we can't just leave it out there. We need to know more. We need control, or this could spiral out of our hands." Carter nodded slowly, his mind racing with the gravity of the situation. The Revenant had just defeated the Dominion, the most powerful force in the galaxy, without so much as firing a single shot. It had destroyed their fleet with eerie precision, and now it was speaking in cryptic terms, offering nothing but questions. The ship was a weapon, but it was something more. It was alive in a way that humanity couldn't even begin to comprehend. He turned to Whittaker, his jaw set. "Prepare the team. We're going to the Revenant. We'll learn what it wants and why it's here. We can't let it remain a mystery any longer. If we want to survive, we need to understand it fully." The team was quickly mobilized. Carter and a small group of officers made their way to the landing bay, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. The Revenant wasn't just a ship, it was a presence, and it had a mind of its own. It had not only saved humanity, but had made it clear that it had its own agenda. As they boarded the transport ship that would take them to the Revenant, Carter's thoughts continued to race. Was this a gift or a curse? What kind of power had humanity unleashed, and more importantly, was it something they could control? The transport ship shuddered as it left the safety of Earth's atmosphere and headed toward the dark expanse of space. The Revenant loomed ahead, silent and still. Its dark hull gleamed in the distance, its presence both reassuring and terrifying. As they neared the ship, the comms officer spoke up. "Admiral, the Revenant is transmitting a signal. It's a form of communication, but we can't decipher it." Carter's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, you can't decipher it?" The officer paused. "It's not like anything we've encountered before, sir. It's as if it's testing us, trying to gauge our reaction." Carter's mind spun. The Revenant wasn't just waiting for orders. It was watching them, evaluating them. It was as if it had a will of its own, a consciousness, and that thought chilled him to the bone. When the transport finally docked with the Revenant, Carter stepped out, his boots clanking against the metal floor. The ship felt alive, its very presence overwhelming. The silence that greeted them was suffocating. There was no sound, no hum of engines, no flicker of lights. It was as though the Revenant was waiting for them to make the next move. They moved through the corridors cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Every hallway was pristine, as though the ship had never seen battle. The air was unnervingly cold, the silence oppressive. They'd reached the central chamber, a massive, dark room that stretched farther than the eye could see. At the far end, a holographic projection flickered to life, and for the first time, the voice from before spoke, its tone strangely familiar. "You have arrived. Now you will learn what I am, and what you are not." The room seemed to pulse with energy as the words reverberated through the chamber. Carter swallowed hard. There was no going back now. Whatever the Revenant was, it was no longer just a weapon. It was something much, much more. And humanity was about to find out what that meant. The cold silence in the central chamber felt suffocating, each heartbeat echoing in the emptiness. The voice that had spoken from the holographic projection sent a chill down Carter's spine. But it wasn't fear he felt. It was something deeper. The Revenant wasn't just an advanced ship. It was a presence, something alive, aware, and not bound by the same rules that governed humanity's understanding of technology. The chamber around them seemed to pulse, as if the ship itself was watching them. It was no longer just a machine. It was something otherworldly. "You have arrived." The voice spoke again, its tone eerily calm, but with a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. "Now you will learn what I am, and what you are not." Carter's throat tightened. He stepped forward, his boots clicking on the metallic floor, breaking the silence. His team followed behind him, their expressions tense, but Carter couldn't shake the feeling that every move they made was being observed, studied. He wasn't sure whether to feel like a visitor or an intruder on this strange vessel. The holographic image flickered again, and this time it wasn't just a voice. It was an image. A massive shape appeared before them, too large to fully comprehend, its form shifting and reforming in ways that defied logic. It was almost like watching something not entirely solid, like a shadow cast in an impossible shape. It was alive, but not alive in any way they understood. "This is what you have called Revenant," the voice continued, reverberating around the chamber. "But it is only one part of what I am. This ship is not just a weapon. It is a vessel, a being, and you have unleashed it." Carter's mind raced. A being. The Revenant had always been described as humanity's last defense, a ship designed to be the ultimate weapon against any enemy. But it wasn't just a ship, it was something more. He had suspected this, but hearing the words, hearing it say it aloud, made his stomach churn. "Why did you choose us?" Carter asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of questions in his mind. "Why humanity?" The shape flickered and twisted, the words forming in the space around them. "I did not choose you. You were chosen by the potential you represent. You are still primitive, still bound by the limitations of your kind. But you have something rare, the will to evolve. The words hung in the air, a mix of praise and criticism. Carter exchanged a look with Whittaker, who was visibly unsettled. The Revenant didn't speak of them as humans. It spoke of them as if they were something raw, something that could be molded into something greater, something other. "You speak as if we are your project," Whittaker said, her voice shaky but firm. "But we didn't ask for this. We didn't choose to." "You do not understand," the voice interrupted, its tone still calm, but carrying an edge. "You are not ready. Not ready to wield what you have awakened. The power contained within this vessel is beyond what your kind can comprehend. It is ancient, older than your civilization." The air seemed to thrum with tension as the holographic image began to shift again, showing flashes of strange, foreign landscapes and incomprehensible technology. "What you have unleashed is both a gift and a curse. A tool of power, yes, but not just that. It was never meant for destruction alone. It is a force that can shape worlds, but it requires guidance. And you," the voice trailed off, as though the words themselves were too much to comprehend. The tension in the room was unbearable now, each officer standing still, too afraid to speak or move, waiting for what would come next. "You have no idea what you have unlocked," the voice said again, but this time there was an edge of something deeper, something ancient, almost like a warning. ****, you have touched the beginning of the end. The cycle is not yet complete. You must choose, to wield me or to destroy me. The galaxy will not forgive your ignorance." Carter's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of those words hung in the air like a physical force. He had thought that defeating the Dominion had been the end of their struggle, but it was clear now that it had been only the beginning. The Revenant, this strange, incomprehensible force, had plans, and those plans were far beyond anything he or humanity had imagined. The ship's form shimmered again, its shape growing more defined, and the voice spoke one final time. "The galaxy is changing. You will either rise or fall with it. There is no middle ground." The image flickered out, leaving the room in complete silence. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as though the room itself was holding its breath. Finally, Carter exhaled slowly, his mind spinning with the implications of what had just happened. He turned to Whittaker, his eyes meeting hers. "What do we do now?" she asked softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. Carter looked back at the now dark central chamber. The Revenant had given them a choice, but it wasn't a simple one. The power it contained was undeniable, but so were the dangers that came with it. It was more than a ship. It was alive, and it was forcing them into a role they weren't prepared for. "We prepare," Carter said finally, his voice firm, though his mind was still reeling. "We learn. We find out what we're really dealing with. Because if we don't, if we fail to understand it, the consequences will be far worse than anything the Dominion could have ever done." He turned and began walking toward the exit, his team following closely behind. Each step felt heavier than the last. The weight of the decision ahead of them was enough to crush anyone, but Carter couldn't afford to hesitate. He couldn't afford to let humanity falter now. The Revenant wasn't just humanity's last line of defense. It was their only hope, and their greatest threat. They had been given a chance, but Carter knew that they would have to rise to meet it. If they didn't, the galaxy would be waiting, and it wouldn't show any mercy. The silence that followed the appearance of the Revenant was suffocating, its presence filling the room like a living, breathing entity. Carter's team stood frozen, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling in their minds. They had known the Revenant was special, but this was something beyond their understanding. A living ship, an ancient being, speaking of powers beyond imagination. The more they learned, the more questions grew. Carter's eyes darted to the other members of the team, all standing in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. The air felt thick with uncertainty. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was alive, And it had chosen them, or rather, it had brought them to this moment. "We've got to move." Carter finally broke the silence, his voice steady but carrying a weight of responsibility he hadn't felt before. "We can't stay here, not with what's coming." He didn't need to say more. Everyone understood. They had just stumbled upon something far larger than themselves. The Revenant wasn't simply a tool to fight the Dominion. It was a force that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Whether for good or ill, no one knew yet. But Carter was certain of one thing. If humanity didn't figure out how to control it, they would be consumed by it. "Everyone, gear up," Carter continued. "We're going to need to learn everything we can about this ship. But first, we get back to Earth, report what we found, and prepare for whatever comes next." The crew nodded in unison, and within moments, the control room was a flurry of activity. Whittaker moved to the main console, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked to bring the systems back online. Carter could see the worry in her eyes, but also a flicker of determination. They all felt it. The fear, yes, but also the weight of destiny. Outside the control room, the Revenant loomed, its massive form casting long, imposing shadows across the corridor. It was no longer just a ship. The crew could feel its power, its presence, like an unseen hand reaching out, brushing against their very souls. The walls around them seemed to hum with an energy that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Revenant wasn't just an ally. It was unpredictable. They had no idea if it would ever truly be on their side. But they didn't have the luxury of time to question that now. The Dominion's forces were still out there, and while the Revenant had destroyed their fleet, it had done so without mercy. It had shown them how easily it could annihilate a force 10,000 strong. If the Revenant was as powerful as it seemed, they had no idea what would happen next. Whittaker's voice broke through his thoughts. "Carter, I've got the ship systems working again. The navigation's intact. We can head back to Earth as soon as we're ready." He nodded. "Good. Let's make it quick. We need to get back to Earth and warn them. We need to prepare them for what's coming." As they moved through the corridors, Carter couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that lay before them. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was caught in the middle. They had been given a glimpse of something otherworldly, and now they had to decide how to wield that power. If they chose wrong, it could spell disaster for everyone. The tension in the air was palpable as they made their way to the ship's bridge. The crew was quiet, each lost in their thoughts, the enormity of their situation slowly sinking in. The Revenant had given them no answers, only cryptic warnings and cryptic promises. The ship wasn't an ally. It was a force to be reckoned with, and humanity had to learn how to wield that force. As Carter reached the bridge and took his seat in the command chair, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were about to step into something far bigger than they were prepared for. This wasn't just about fighting the Dominion anymore. This was about control. Control of the Revenant, control of the future, and control of their own survival. The ship hummed to life around him, the massive engines coming online with a low, resonating growl. Carter glanced at the viewport, watching as the stars stretched and shifted in a blur. They were leaving the Revenant, but only just. The ship would be with them in ways they couldn't yet comprehend, a shadow looming over their every move. "Set course for Earth," Carter ordered, his voice quiet but resolute. "And get us there fast. We don't know what we're up against, but we're going to need every second we can get." The crew moved quickly, following their captain's orders without hesitation. The ship's systems hummed to life, its sleek form beginning to power through the cosmos. Carter stared out at the stars, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities, fears, and the nagging sense that this was just the beginning of something much darker. The Revenant wasn't just a weapon. It wasn't just a ship. It was a force, and it would shape the future of the galaxy in ways they couldn't yet understand. But one thing was certain: humanity's fate would never be the same. And as the stars stretched out before them, Carter couldn't help but wonder if they were heading straight into the unknown, or straight into a storm that would consume them all. The only certainty he had was that they would have to face it together. Because if they didn't, if they failed, the consequences wouldn't just be their own. They would echo across the entire galaxy.